This was a like low-key big week for comic books. Marvel was kind of rebranding ASM with Joe Kelly, Justina Ireland, Ed McGuinness, obviously doing the 8 Deaths of Spider-Man. We got Absolute Batman 2. But the one I was looking the most forward to was G.I. Joe #1, Josh Williamson, Tom Reilly, the team behind the Duke miniseries in the Energon Universe. And I'm just going to put this out as little spoilers. Oh, it delivers. It's a really, really good comic book. Unfortunately, we're only going to get 2 issues before the end of the year. It's going to be very difficult to crack like the top 10 of the year. At this rate, as long as the second issue is pretty darn good, it'll definitely get an honorable mention. But this is a fantastic comic book. I cannot wait to talk about this today, but I did want to give you guys a heads up on something. The output has been down as of late because we've had a major typhoon. We had like all these, technical difficulties. My entire family's been sick, and we're having another thing happening right here, right now. There's a super typhoon. Actually, there's 2 typhoons. The first one's kind of gone through, and then a second one is coming through. That's a super typhoon. It's going to be absolutely enormous. And right now, it looks like it's going to go north and certainly hit us, but not hit us hard. But there are other models suggesting that it's going to go right over the top of my city. And if that happens, I'm likely to lose electricity for upwards of a week, likely to lose internet probably for a week, and other services out there. So hopefully there's no downtime and I can continue doing what I've been trying to get back to, by full capacity as far as output. But it's been very, very difficult for the last month, and we're hitting another snag. If there's no comics aficionados tomorrow, you'll know why. Because we are getting absolutely hammered by a super typhoon. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but I did want to give you guys the heads up, a little bit of an explanation of some of the craziness going on around here. But we should talk about Josh Williamson and Tom Reilly's G.I. Joe #1, the book I was most looking forward to here in the last quarter of the year, and it absolutely delivered more than I ever could have expected. I can't wait to get into this. The art itself, I have heard a lot of people kind of tell me that they don't particularly like Tom Reilly's art, obviously on the Duke series because that one came out beforehand. Me personally, I could not disagree more with that assessment. Not only do I think the Tom Reilly art is absolutely fantastic, it's retro enough that it feels like the 80s, also modern enough that it really stands up to other artists out there. But Jordie Bellaire, the colorist on this book, is not combining every color under the rainbow to make everything look like shades of green and poop. Now, obviously, there's some green and stuff because it is the sky and they're wearing uniforms and everything. But look how these characters are fucking popping off the background. They absolutely stand out. I'm so tired of everything being so dark that you can't see anything that's going on. I'm so tired of every sky being 50 shades of 50 different colors to where nothing ever pops out. These are comic books. They're a visual medium. And I love what Tom Reilly and Jordie Bellaire are bringing to the table. Exactly what we got in Duke. And I think it looks a little bit better here in G.I. Joe #1. And certainly kudos for being critical to those guys and gals for doing an awesome job. I think the art in this book looks great. And I think it is a wonderful shout out to the 80s origins of the G.I. Joe franchise. And I'm absolutely loving it. I hope you guys are loving the art as well. When we get into the story, it's mostly a story from Duke's perspective. It makes sense. He's the team leader. It's a very early stages G.I. Joe. We haven't even seen, Snake Eyes and some of the other really prominent Joes that you would expect to become mainstays of the series. And a lot of it is him introducing his team. And certainly we've seen all these members of the team. We've seen the Baroness. We've seen Clutch. We've seen CoverGirl. We've seen Stalker. We've seen Rock and Roll. But we're starting to learn about who they are from Duke's perspective as he's kind of giving his report to Colonel Hawk on what his team is, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and how he wants to use them. Not only do you get to learn about the characters, you get the introduction, but it's not the lazy Brian Michael Bendis. CoverGirl looks like $1 million, but she'll cut your balls off like stupid nonsense. It's a good, solid introduction on the bare basics of the characters if you didn't read Duke, but also gives you information on how Duke himself is feeling about the team, which I think is very, very pertinent. It's very, very effective. They're very good intros, in my opinion. And a lot of it, when it comes down to Duke, is his own insecurity about how he feels about this and a lot of the trauma that he's still experiencing because he did show up, I believe, in Transformers #2, where he saw Starscream essentially kill his fellow pilot when he squished him. Oh, he's like, oh, squishy. Witnessed this enormous robot that no one had ever seen on Earth basically kill his friend. and he's kind of living out that nightmare, and that's how we kind of got the Duke miniseries. So Duke isn't feeling completely confident about the team because he realizes they're not all him. I need him to get up to what I'm doing, but he's also got all this pent-up trauma just sitting underneath the surface on what he witnessed, and it's definitely motivating him, but it could certainly cause him to make some mistakes and take things a little bit too personal. I think Colonel Hawk does a really good job in this meeting here and definitely feels like a true leader. And when I say leader, I'm not talking about like a squad leader. I'm talking about somebody that leads groups and groups of men. He explains to him, he's like, hey, you've already got Duke. That's you. You need to make sure the other people are the best versions of themselves and you're all able to work together. Not everybody on your team is going to be a carbon copy of you in the end. Lays the groundwork where the team is, that they're not really cohesive yet. They're just doing the first training exercises. Not everything is going very well. And certainly the Baroness already feels like an outcast and may not be buying into this whole team concept when it comes to G.I. Joe. But it's up to Duke and Hawk, obviously, to put all this stuff together. And I think it's very, very effective to really lay out the motivations, the mindset of how Duke is working, how he feels about the team, and also laying out how the team isn't quite working yet, but it is in the very early stages. Now, this is a G.I. Joe comic book, and this isn't all set up. We get the G.I. Joe team on their very first mission. They're not very happy. They're basically protecting some Cybertronian artifacts that were dumped into the ocean. Obviously, Transformers number 12. They were able to collect some of that stuff. They know that there are some rogue elements out there that might be after it. The G.I. Joe team is set in there to protect it until they can get it to a more secure facility. They're all bored. They're like, why are we even doing this? And all of a sudden, wouldn't you know it, Cobra, led by Cobra Commander with Destro by his side, make a play on the building. And we get some amazing all-out action. There's this great scene from Tom Reilly where Duke is like, I'm going to take down their air support, and just jumps out of a window and grabs the helicopter and gets into it. And we get some really good CQB, close quarters combat. And there's all kinds of lasers and everything going on. And there's a couple of moments in here that I personally, if I were Josh Williamson, and I'm not obviously a writer on Skybound or G.I. Joe, I don't know that I would have made these choices because they are very big choices with very long-term ramifications that could let a lot of people down. But I thought they were very bold. I'm glad that he did them because he definitely ups the stakes, ups the ante on G.I. Joe, and sends it through the roof in this very first issue, which is a tone setter. It lets you know lives are at risk in this particular comic book. And I thought it was a bold move, very, very well done. And the all-out action scene on the storming of the building by Cobra was absolutely badass. It was the cherry on top of a very, very, very good comic book. There's also an explanation why Cobra has lasers, which I thought was really, really well done. We did get the Destro miniseries, and to be completely honest, looking back on it, it was completely unnecessary. There was nothing in there done well enough that actually warranted the series. To establish that Destro and Cobra Commander are working together, but they don't really like each other, you could have done it in 1 or 2 pages in this particular issue. They show up, and Duke goes, Cobra Commander and Destro working together? I thought they were enemies. My goodness, they've decided to team up. And then you realize, oh, they don't really like each other, but they're working together. It was super duper simple. We didn't need a 4-issue miniseries to do that, but we do reiterate here, obviously, that Destro is a weapons dealer. That's one of the reasons that Cobra Commander ends up recruiting him and bringing him into the fold. And they've got a new weapon based on Energon technology. And wouldn't you know it, it's a laser weapon. And it's everything that you ever wanted as far as an explanation and an origin story for the laser weapons from Cobra, which I thought was really, really well done. Just as a nerd and a G.I. Joe fan, I really like that moment. Some people might think it's throwaway and maybe even unnecessary, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really good introduction to the laser weapons, but also another reminder that maybe Destro and Cobra Commander aren't completely on board, which is something that you do need to know about the interpersonal conflicts of the Cobra organization as well. G.I. Joe #1 is not the only amazing thing that came out of Energon this week. We actually got, I think it's Transformers 14, Jason Howard on art, obviously with Dana Warren Johnson writing. I wasn't getting soft on Transformers, but I was kind of going, okay, it's taking a little bit of a dip as far as quality. I thought the 12th issue was a really good go-home, but leading into that, I was like, not quite as good as some of the stuff they did before that. The issue afterwards, they set up this new Starscream being found by agents of Cobra, basically being attached to a his tank type of thing. And I was like, oh, all right, we're going to get like a little mini series from Jason Howard illustrating that's just going to kind of be about Starscream in here. This Starscream story that you get in Transformers 14 was absolutely phenomenal, and Transformers comes back in a really big way. Transformers has not been bad by any means. We've actually recommended every single issue on the channel, but this is a really strong issue. It's not quite as good as G.I. Joe #1, but it's really, really damn close, and it's the best issue of Transformers, or one of the two best issues of Transformers we've probably gotten in the last 5. I thought it was really good return to form, and I liked it a lot. The Jason Howard art, not quite as good as Jorge Corona, in my opinion. Certainly not as good as Daniel Warren Johnson, in my opinion, but it's starting to grow on me, and I think it's working out very well there. So those are my thoughts on G.I. Joe #1 and the Energon Universe, return to form for Transformers. Do not sleep on that comic book, and certainly don't be sleeping on Void Rivals, another very good comic book in the Energon Universe. I had very high expectations coming into G.I. Joe #1 from Josh Williamson and Tom Reilly, and they exceeded all of them. I assumed this was going to be a very, very good comic book, and it's a great comic book. It's not perfect. There's actually like a little, I think it's 5 pages, maybe it's 4-page introduction to a character. And I understand they wanted to do the introduction of the new character in the first issue. Has nothing to do with this story or anything going on in this particular comic book whatsoever. It ends up being kind of a waste, even though I think once again, Jordie Bellaire really shines on that particular moment. But that's kind of a waste of real estate. If you're not going to make that character pertinent to the story that you're telling right now, you probably could have held that off. Otherwise, I just don't see anything like even minusculely bad about this. Everything else I think was just done at such a high level. You know, this is like a 4.5 out of 5, 4.75 more likely out of 5, 9 out of 10, more likely a 9.5 out of 10 type of comic book. Highest recommendation, right on the verge of being a perfect comic book, if just not for a little bit of a wasted real estate. As far as I'm concerned, I don't have a problem with the character. They just had nothing to do what was actually going on within this comic book. Will it tie in later? Absolutely. We can already see that's going to happen, but they haven't done it yet. So within the confines of this particular comic book, kind of a waste of time. Otherwise, absolutely awesome. Action, top notch. Love the art. Love the characterization on Duke. Everything makes sense. Setting out the motivations, the constructs of the team, and how some pieces are working together, but Baroness certainly feels like an outcast. The little conflicts that you've got going on between Destro and Cobra Commander, very, very essential to the Cobra organization. All laid out, all reminded there. And the introduction of laser weapons and the first Cobra assault on G.I. Joe. Now they are mortal enemies, and I cannot wait for this one. This was an absolute home run, in my opinion. Doesn't get much better than this. If you appreciate this and what we're doing here on Think Critical YouTube, and you would like more reviews and podcast stuff like that, and you'd like to support what I'm doing here, I do want to invite you to come visit me on Think Critical Patreon. There's a link in the video description. Lots more comic book talk that you won't get here on YouTube. We do take little fragments of some of the Patreon stuff and put it out here on YouTube. But for the most part, 95% of it is going to be exclusive only to the Patreon backers. If you want to support us there, I hope to see you very, very soon.